Billionaire Sheikh stood motionless, his dark eyes fixated on the fragile figure before him, whose trembling hands swept the dusty streets with a quiet dignity he had long forgotten. Beneath the shimmering gold of his rings and the weight of his empire, a storm of pain and disbelief roiled within him. How cold his love had turned, that day he vanished from her life. Now the past clawed back with unforgiving fury, bearing a secret heavier than desert sands. Was the child she carried his? The sun blazed mercilessly over the vast emirate, where opulence stretched as far as the eye could see. Towering marble palaces rose against endless dunes, their walls shimmering with filigree of diamonds and silk drapes that fluttered like the wings of desert falcons. Incense and spices mingled with the arid breeze, perfuming the air with a heady reminder of the wealth and tradition that wove through the veins of this land. Yet beyond the gilded gates and crystal chandeliers, the streets whispered a different story. A story written in humble hands, worn shoes, and sweat. She moved with quiet purpose, her dark curls catching stray rays of sun as she bent low to sweep fallen sand. There was a resilience etched into her delicate frame, a fire barely tamed beneath the weight of hardship. Her eyes, once bright with dreams, now held shadows deeper than the desert night. The swell of her belly, undeniable beneath the faded fabric, was a bloom catching the Sheikh's sharp gaze, an unspoken dilemma that threatened to unravel the frozen fortress around his heart. Years had passed since that merciless goodbye, when pride had silenced the love that once bound them in a passion fierce enough to rival his vast fortunes. Now the sight of her, reduced to meager sustenance and the harshness of the streets, shattered the illusion of control he so fiercely clung to. His breath hitched, a knot tightened in his chest as conflicted emotions surged. Desire wove through the anguish like a whispered promise, but shame and regret pressed heavier still. Her glance darted up, sharp and wary, catching the tumult flickering in his gaze. There was no welcome in her posture, only guarded defiance, carved from scars no palace could heal. The Sheikh's voice, usually cold and commanding, caught in the desert wind as he forced words through the ache. "I never thought I'd see you like this." Silence stretched, thick and fragile. In that fragile moment, the truth suspended between them, heavy, trembling, and begging to be claimed. He stepped closer, compelled by forces that no gold could buy. His eyes dropped involuntarily to the curve of her form, where life blossomed uncertain yet unyielding. "Is it mine?" The question escaped before he could anchor it back in pride. The air pulsed with raw tension, past and present, colliding like a desert storm, ready to consume them both. The Sheikh's world, so meticulously constructed, teetered on the edge of revelation and ruin. Forgiveness, love, betrayal, they swirled in the thick heat as destiny's harsh hand demanded justice. Before the next secret of this vast empire is unveiled, make sure you're part of our story caravan. Many fates are yet to be decided, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Leave a like if the heart of this billionaire sheikh has already captured yours. Tell me in the comments, which city are you following this saga from, and what twist do you think awaits? Your passion for these dramas inspires us to keep going. Thank you for being with us. The Sheikh's heart pounded in a silent war, each beat a reminder of everything he had tried to bury beneath layers of pride and cold ambition. The fragile woman before him, bent over in the relentless sun, was a living echo of a past he thought was extinguished. Yet here she was, carrying the undeniable proof of a bond that neither time nor distance could erase. Her gaze, sharp yet wary, never faltered as she straightened, the curves of her pregnant form outlined beneath threadbare fabrics. The wind caught strands of her dark curls, lifting them briefly like a fragile banner of defiance. The Sheikh's breath caught. How had she endured so much? Humility, pain, abandonment, without losing the fierce spirit he once adored in her. "Is it mine?" The words barely a whisper, yet they thundered between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Her eyes flashed at the question, a mixture of hurt and silence. She neither confirmed nor denied, as though the answer itself was a blade suspended over their fate. A servant's distant call echoed faintly from the palace, but neither moved. The opulent world behind the gilded gates felt miles away, irrelevant to the storm raging in the narrow, dusty street. "You left without a word," she finally said, voice low but steady, a tremor barely contained. "Left me to face this alone." His jaw tightened, the weight of his empire a burden against his chest. Pride blinded me. I thought I was protecting us. Protecting? Her laugh was bitter, twisted by years of solitude. "You left me to die in shadows, your empire shining bright above me." The Sheikh's hand clenched into a fist. Every accusation seeped into his bones, a relentless sting. Yet beneath the pain, a fragile ember of hope flickered. This was not just a confrontation. It was an opening, a crack in the wall he had built so carefully to guard his heart. "Let me help you," he said, voice rough with emotion. "You don't have to suffer in silence anymore." She met his gaze, eyes dark and unyielding. "Help? After everything? Why should I believe you've changed?" He took a slow step forward, the desert heat wrapping around them like a jealous witness. "Because I am not the man who walked away. I am a different man now, if you give me a chance." Her breath hitched, the raw honesty slicing through the years of bitterness. Yet scars ran deep, and the future was uncertain. The sound of horses approached, sudden and urgent. The Sheikh's eyes snapped toward the horizon, where a dust cloud spiraled, ridden by a messenger garbed in emerald silk. A cold dread settled in the pit of his stomach. The moment shattered. The messenger dismounted swiftly, impassive yet urgent. "Your Highness, there has been an incident at the northern border. Your presence is demanded immediately." The Sheikh's gaze turned from the woman to the horizon, where the vast desert stretched endlessly, promising danger and upheaval. The fragile thread between their worlds threatened to snap. He hesitated, torn between duty and desire. The woman before him stepped closer, the swell of her belly nearly touching him now. "If you go," she said softly, "promise me one thing." He looked down, searching the fierce vulnerability shining in her eyes. "Promise me you'll come back." The words lingered in the heavy air, a fragile plea wrapped in layers of hope and fear. The Sheikh swallowed hard, the weight of his empire pressed against his soul, yet beneath it all, something far more precious, a chance at redemption, at love, pulled him back. "I promise." As the messenger awaited, the Sheikh reached out a tentative hand, fingers brushing against hers, a touch laden with unspoken apologies and possibilities. But before the fragile moment could deepen, a piercing scream erupted from the alley behind them. The woman's eyes widened in terror as shadows surged in midnight, faces obscured, moving with deadly intent. Before the sheikh could react, a sharp pain flared at his side. He staggered, a crimson bloom blossoming beneath his pristine thob. Time slowed. The world narrowed to breathless chaos. The last thing he saw was her face, the woman who carried his secret, her eyes burning with shock and something fierce, defiance. As darkness crept in, the sheikh realized the true battle was only beginning, and the secret he feared might be the reason for an all-consuming war waiting to be unleashed. And in that fleeting moment, the line between love and betrayal blurred into the endless desert night. The sharp pain seared through the sheikh's side, stealing his breath before he could react. He staggered, the world tilting as darkness edged in at the corners of his vision. The harsh desert sun seemed to fade, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed down like the weight of his own guilt. Her scream, raw and desperate, was the only sound anchoring him to the present. The woman, his past, his impossible future, leaned over him, eyes wide with terror and fierce determination. She had been right there, and suddenly the fragile thread connecting them threatened to snap. Hands shaking but determined, she reached toward his wound, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the blood that stained the pristine fabric of his thob. Her breath hitched, but her resolve did not waver. She would not let him fall, not today, not like this. "Stay with me," she whispered, more to herself than to him, her voice breaking the desert stillness. "You're not leaving me now." The shadows behind them moved swiftly, but the sound of distant guards rushing in urged the attackers to retreat. The narrow street swallowed the night's violence, leaving only dust swirling in the heated air. He blinked slowly, the hazy shapes of guards appearing like guardian angels, their armor glimmering even under the unforgiving sun. A flash of relief struck him, shallow but fierce. She had saved him. Still, the pain remained, throbbing in relentless waves. Through half-lidded eyes, he saw her silhouette framed by the shimmering dust. She looked fragile, yet unyielding, a paradox that pulled at the very core of him. The child she carried, hidden beneath threadbare cloth, was as much a sign of life as she was a symbol of his failures. His voice was barely a rasp, weighted with regret. "I should never have left you. Never." Her gaze met his, sharp and unreadable, and then softened, just enough to betray the storm within. "You left, but I survived," she said quietly. "Alone with a secret you don't even know how to face." He swallowed hard, every breath a battle against the searing pain and his own shame. The castle gates loomed not far, opulence and power basking in cold neglect from the turmoil unfolding in the shadows of its streets. He had lived in that gilded cage for years, blind to the life unraveling just beyond his reach. Now, the walls he'd built were crumbling, brick by brick, under the weight of truth. A healer hurried forward, her hands steady, but eyes wide with urgency. The sheikh clenched his jaw, the sting of the wound fading into the sharp ache of responsibility. "She needs to come with us," he managed to say, his dark eyes pleading silently with the woman who held his fate and his heart. She hesitated, the wind-curling strands of her dark hair around her face. The proud fire that had carried her through years of exile flickered on the edge of surrender. "I will come," she said finally, voice low but resolute, "but on one condition." He nodded, wincing as he was lifted into the arms of the guards. "Promise me," she breathed, "promise that this time you will fight, not just for your empire, but for us, for the child." Her words struck him deeper than any blade. The child, the living proof of a union forged in passion and shattered by betrayal, hung between them like a fragile jewel that could either heal or destroy. "I swear it." The sheikh vowed, his voice a rough caress against the heat of the desert air. As they moved toward the palace, every step felt like a crossing into unknown territory. The healer's quick movements, the wary glances she cast back at him, all spoke of danger beyond the physical wound. Inside the grand hall, the air was thick with whispered conspiracies. Courtiers lined the marble corridors, their eyes flickering like shadows, some filled with concern, others with cold calculation. The news of the attack would ripple through the emirate like wildfire. His closest advisor approached, face taut with unease. "Your Highness, this was no accident. The northern tribes are restless, emboldened by recent rumors. But more alarming, there are mutterings of a traitor within your own court." The sheikh's fingers clenched the arm of the chair, the pain in his side momentarily forgotten. "A traitor?" The word tasted bitter on his tongue. "Who would dare betray me now?" His advisor's gaze flicked toward the heavy curtains, as if the shadows themselves might whisper the truth. "That is what we must discover before their plans come to fruition." Leaving the grand chamber, the sheikh's thoughts spiraled back to the fragile woman waiting beyond. She was no mere victim of fate. She was a force tempered by fire and cruelty. The unborn child she carried was both a blessing and a curse, a beacon of hope and a target for enemies lurking in the dark. He had abandoned her once, but this time the stakes were immeasurably higher. Later, alone in the dim light of a private chamber, the sheikh pressed his gloved hand to the growing bruise. On his side, the pain was sharp, a reminder of his mortality amid endless power. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. It was her, determined, weary, yet unbroken. "Your presence is demanded at the palace council," she said, voice steady, despite the exhaustion that shadowed her eyes. He rose slowly, steadied by a newfound resolve. "Then we face this together." She nodded, a fleeting warmth breaking through the cold armor of their shared past. They stepped into the corridor, side by side, the distance between them charged with unspoken promises and delicate hope. The palace, a vast labyrinth of riches and secrets, was no longer just his dominion. It was their battleground. As the door to the council chamber opened, the flicker of torchlight revealed faces masked by loyalty and lies. Amid whispered accusations and sharp glances, The Sheikh realized the true war was not only against the rebels beyond the borders, but against shadows that thrived in the heart of his empire. And in that moment, the Sheikh's breath caught, not from pain, but from a voice that sliced through the tense air, clear and chilling, as it named the traitor in their midst. The corridor outside the council chamber was swallowed by tense silence, as the Sheikh and the woman who carried his secret moved in unison. The weight of his injury lingering, each step was a careful balance between pain and willpower. His dark eyes flicked toward her, tracing the subtle curve of her brow, the faint tremble in her hands. Beneath the veil of exhaustion, she radiated a quiet strength that unsettled him more than any sword. The heavy doors opened with a solemn creak, revealing a room bathed in the muted glow of candlelight. Marble pillars loomed like silent sentinels, their surfaces etched with ancient script that spoke of power, history, and unyielding legacy. Courtiers and advisors clustered in shadows, their faces masks of curiosity and concealed motives. The air was thick with whispered rumors, the very atmosphere charged with suspicion. His closest advisor, Ahmed, stepped forward, his voice low yet urgent. "Your Highness, the northern tribes grow restless, fueled by whispers of rebellion. But deeper unrest festers within the palace walls. I fear the traitor is closer than we imagined." The Sheikh's gaze sharpened, pain forgotten momentarily, as a cold fire sparked in his chest. Every year of rule, each hard-fought battle, had brought him here, to betrayal woven not from the desert wind, but from the hearts of those he trusted. He turned his attention to the woman at his side. Her eyes, shadowed and fierce, did not waver under the weight of palace intrigue. She was no stranger to hardship. Her years outside the gilded cage had forged a resilience that both frightened and intrigued him. "I will unmask this traitor," he declared, voice firm despite the ache bleeding through his side. "And I will protect what is mine, my empire, my family." She met his gaze, a storm of doubts and hopes churning behind dark pupils. "Then let me stand with you," she said quietly, "not just as the bearer of your child, but as your partner in this fight." The Sheikh's breath caught, a mixture of gratitude and guilt swirling inside him. He had left her to bear their burden. Alone, tangled in secrecy and danger, now fate had thrown them together once more, under the harsh light of imminent threat. A herald entered swiftly, a scroll clutched tightly in trembling hands. "Your Highness, urgent news from the southern border. Another attack was reported this evening. The rebellion spreads like wildfire." The room fell into a hush, the flicker of candle flames, a trembling echo of the turmoil outside. The Sheikh clenched his jaw, the world narrowing once more to blood and betrayal. He dismissed the courtiers with a sharp gesture, retreating with the woman through winding halls adorned with silk tapestries and glittering sconces. The scent of oud and jasmine lingered heavily, contrasting with the cold steel pressing against his ribcage. "Where will you be taken?" she asked, voice barely above the whisper of silk brushing. "Stone floors." He exhaled deeply, muscles taut. "To the front line, where these rebels threaten all I have built." Her hand brushed against his arm, cautious, yet electric. And what of us, of the child? Her question wrapped around his heart like a desert night wind, chilling but impossible to ignore. He met her eyes, the raw vulnerability in her reflection as clear as the desert stars. This empire was never mine alone, and neither are you. Pain twisted sharply with hope in his chest. For so long, pride had been his shield. Now it felt like a chain, binding him as much as it protected. "Promise me," she said, voice trembling with unspoken fears. "Promise you will not leave again, not for gold, nor for power." Her plea cut through layers of regret and ambition. The sheikh nodded slowly. The promise settled on his tongue like a prayer. "I swear by all that is sacred," he vowed, "I will fight for us, for our future." The night stretched around them, tapestry of stars pressing down, as if the heavens themselves awaited the war to come. His mind raced as the palatial walls closed in, memories of abandonment and love clashing in a symphony of pain. He wondered if forgiveness could root itself in the scars of betrayal, if love could bloom beneath the ashes of past mistakes. Suddenly, a soft, urgent sound pierced the quiet. A faint shuffle, barely noticeable over the distant call of night birds. The sheikh stiffened, every instinct alert. From the shadows emerged a figure, a stranger, cloaked in the midnight garb of a messenger, face shadowed, but eyes sharp with warning. "Your Highness," the man said with grave urgency, "there is news you must hear. The traitor has made their move." A cold shiver crept along the sheikh's spine. The woman stepped forward, lips parted, in silent defiance, the life within her pressing like a fragile heartbeat against the uncertain future. The messenger's glance flicked to her before returning to the sheikh. "They have compromised your closest guard. Tonight, a plan to seize the throne is underway." The room seemed to shrink, walls pressing closer as betrayal and blood stained the future he had fought to shape. The sheikh's fingers curled into fists, eyes burning with a deadly resolve. He met the woman's gaze, not with fear, but with a promise only they could understand. "This ends now," he said, voice low but unyielding. Her breath caught, a mix of fear and fierce hope glinting like fire beneath the moonlight filtering through arched windows. Together, they would face the shadows lurking in the heart of his empire. But the true battle, for love, power, and truth, was only just beginning. And as the chamber doors closed behind them, sealing their fate, a whispered name echoed through the halls, the name of the traitor. The sheikh's eyes widened in shock, heart pounding, with a betrayal far closer than he could ever have imagined. The candlelight flickered against the gilded walls, casting long shadows that danced like restless spirits across the marble floor. The sheikh's breath came heavier than before, each inhale a sharp reminder of the wound that pulsed beneath his thawb. The cold weight of betrayal clung to the room, thickening the already suffocating air. At his side, she stood silently. The faint rise and fall of her belly, a fragile rhythm amidst the storm raging within the palace. His dark eyes locked onto the council chamber doors as the whispered name echoed again in his mind. a name wrapped in treacherous silence. The faces around him, masks of loyalty, hid secrets as dangerous as the desert sands outside. Every glance felt like a blade poised to strike, every whisper a threat wrapped in velvet. Sheikh Salim came a voice sharp and urgent, pulling him from the depths of his conflicted thoughts. It was Ahmed, his closest advisor, yet in that moment even Ahmed's words echoed with uncertainty. The court is divided. Many suspect each other, but none know the true betrayer. You must act swiftly before this rot consumes us all. Salim's jaw tightened. The empire he had, built with iron will, now trembled under shadows, born from the trust he had extended without question. His gaze shifted to the woman beside him, the one who carried his blood and the weight of his past failures. Her eyes, fierce and unyielding, spoke volumes without words. She was no longer the fragile girl who had vanished into the dust. She was his mirror and his reckoning. The tension in the room tightened like a noose as Salim's voice broke the silence. We need a plan, one that cuts through lies and reveals the truth. No more hesitation. A murmur ran through the courtiers, fear flickering in their eyes like wildfire. The stakes had never been higher, not just for the throne, but for the fragile hope of redemption flickering between the sheikh and the woman who stood beside him. As the council dispersed, Salim felt a rough hand steady his arm. The pain radiating from his side was a dull ache now, overshadowed by the turmoil in his heart. "Rest, Your Highness," urged the healer, her eyes kind yet wary. "You need strength if we are to survive what comes." He looked down to find the woman's hand brushing lightly against his, tentative, almost fragile, a gesture laden with all the words they dared not speak aloud. "I will not rest until this is over," he whispered, voice thick with unshed emotion. "For them, for us." Her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes shimmering with a mixture of hope and fear. "Then promise me, Salim, no more secrets, no more running." He swallowed the sting of pride and nodded. "I swear it." Night wrapped the palace in a velvet cloak as they moved through the labyrinthine halls, the flicker of torchlight illuminating ancient tapestries and portraits of ancestors who once ruled with as much fire and passion. Passing through a private gallery, Salim paused, his gaze caught by a portrait of an old sheikh whose eyes seemed to watch him with silent judgment. The weight of legacy pressed heavy on his shoulders. Could he right the wrongs of the past, shield those he loved, and still claim the love he had abandoned? Or would he be swallowed whole by the desert's merciless embrace? A sudden rustle behind them broke the trance. Salim turned sharply, dark eyes searching the dim corridor. A figure cloaked in deep emerald slipped from the shadows. A trusted messenger, breathless and grave. "Your Highness," the man said, bowing low, "we intercepted a secret message. The traitor acts tonight. The palace itself is not safe." The woman stepped forward, her voice steady despite the crackle of tension. "We must warn the guard. Protect the family. Protect the child." Salim's face hardened. "Gather the loyal. No one leaves the palace. Trust is a blade we must wield carefully." She met his gaze, the silent understanding passing between them, a fragile fortress built of newfound alliance. Hours later, beneath the moon, drenched in silver light, the palace corridors blurred into a maze of whispers and hurried footsteps. Every shadow seemed alive with danger, every echo a threat. Selim's patrol moved like ghosts through the vast halls, the weight of his wounded body forgotten in the urgency of the moment. He paused before a heavy wooden door, knuckles white against its carved surface. Behind it, the promise of truth and perhaps ruin waited. Inside, a small group gathered, faces pale, yet resolute in the flickering candlelight. Among them, a courtier whose eyes gleamed with too much knowing. "This is where it ends," Selim declared, voice low but bursting with determination. "No more lies." The courtier's smug smile faltered as Selim stepped forward, the glint of steel visible beneath his thob's edge. "By the grace of this empire," he intoned, "let the truth be revealed." A sudden crash split the silence, the sound of betrayal breaking loose, and the palace's dark heart pulsing with deadly intent. The woman clung to Selim's arm, her breath hitching as the doors burst open. Figures cloaked in shadow flooded the chamber, faces twisted in rage, weapons drawn, loyalty shattered. Selim's hand tightened around the hilt of a hidden dagger, resolve blazing in his eyes. The child within her stirred, a quiet pulse of life amidst the chaos. "This is not just a fight for power," Selim growled, stepping forward, "but a war for our souls." Amid the storm of clashing steel and whispered threats, a voice pierced through. A name screamed in fury and betrayal. Selim froze, heart hammering. The traitor's identity, finally laid bare, shattered the fragile hope that had just begun to heal. And in that moment, as the walls of the palace seemed to close in, Selim realized the greatest battle was not for gold or crown. It was for the love and legacy he had long feared to face. The woman's hand squeezed his, fierce and unwavering. Together, they would confront the shadows, or be consumed by them. But the traitor's name echoed on. The winds of the desert night, promising that nothing, not even love, would remain untouched by the storm to come. The council chamber fell silent with the weight of the sheikh's words. But the storm raging beyond the grand marble walls was only beginning to swell. Selim's injury throbbed beneath his thawb, a constant reminder of his fragile mortality amid the ruthless game of power. He looked to the woman at his side, the bearer of his secret, whose strength flickered like a stubborn flame in the suffocating gloom. Her gaze met his, unwavering and fierce, an unspoken oath sealing their uneasy alliance. The child she carried stirred softly, a fragile heartbeat echoing the fragile hope, bracing the edges of their unraveling world. "We cannot trust anyone." Ahmed's voice broke through the thick tension, folding the assembled courtiers in unease. "Every shadow may harbor a dagger meant for you, Your Highness." The sheikh nodded, dark eyes narrowing into slits as he took a slow breath, the scents of oud and jasmine swirling faintly around him, a stark contrast to the icy knot tightening in his chest. "Tonight, loyalty will be tested. Secrets will be unveiled. We move with precision. Whispers slipped like serpents beneath vaulted ceilings, carrying rumors of treachery and fractured allegiances. Salim's mind raced through the faces he had once trusted, now potential betrayers, hiding behind polished masks and false smiles. The woman's hand found his silently, curling against his fingers with a gentle insistence. "We face this together," she whispered, barely audible but fiercely grounded in the chaos. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "I should have shielded you. Them. From the moment I left. But I was blinded by pride, by the emptiness I thought would protect us." Her eyes darkened, the years of abandonment bleeding through the moisture that threatened to fall. Protection did not come in your absence. Only pain, secrets, and silence. He closed his eyes for a moment, tasting the bitter sting of regret. The empire outside, glittering with gold and marble, suddenly felt hollow, its walls mere facades for the fractures beneath. The heavy oak doors creaked open again, and a guard hurried in, breath ragged. "Your Highness, we have secured the perimeter, but the traitors' webs run deep. Some servants, even family, may have been compromised." Salim's hand clenched so tightly it turned white. "Then the hunt widens. We root out the venom at its source." The woman's breath came steady, her fierce resolve, unshaken, despite the fear roiling beneath. "I will not let you face this alone. For the child, for what remains of us." Pain tore through his side as a sudden jolt reminded him of his mortal fragility. But he swallowed the agony, focusing on the promise those words carried. Together, they moved through the winding corridors, the flickering torchlight dim against the looming shadows that seemed to watch with hungry eyes. Passing richly woven tapestries that depicted ancestors long gone, Salim's heart tightened. This legacy, layered in honor, blood, and betrayal, was now burdened with his failures and desperate hopes. A narrow stairwell led them down into hidden chambers, rarely tread by the court's many eyes. Here, conspiracies whispered like restless ghosts, and truth often found sanctuary in silence. Ahmed stepped forward, eyes sharp. A message intercepted. The traitor plans to strike soon, and the palace may no longer be safe. Salim's breath hitched, the weight of responsibility settling heavy on his shoulders. The empire might crumble if the snake within struck first. He pulled the woman closer for a fraction of a moment, the scent of sun-warmed skin and soft jasmine filling his senses, a stark contrast to the cold steel that awaited them. "We prepare the guards," he ordered, "and we ready ourselves. No more half measures." Her fingers tightened around his arm, a silent vow to stand firm. The child must have a future, one not steeped in shadows. His eyes softened despite the fierce edge. "I will not fail again. Whatever darkness comes, I will fight for our family." A sharp, urgent knock snapped through the corridor. A young messenger bowed low, a scroll clutched tightly with trembling hands. "Your Highness, urgent news from the East Gate. A group was found lurking, spies disguised as merchants." Salim's lips pressed into a hard line. Enemies closed in from all sides, their faces masked in treachery. Passing swiftly through the cold marble halls, he felt the sting of vulnerability beneath his armor. A king caught between the sword and the shadows, haunted by mistakes and desperate for redemption. In a dimly lit chamber, Salim gathered a handful of trusted guards. The flicker of candlelight cast wavering shadows across faces drawn tight with tension and fear. "This ends tonight," he vowed, voice low but unwavering. "We flush out the traitors. We reclaim this palace, for our people, for the child." The chamber's silence shattered as footsteps thundered in the hall outside, followed by a burst of voices, shouts that echoed with rage and defiance. The woman's eyes widened, a primal instinct flaring as she pressed close to Salim's side. "What now?" she breathed, voice tense. "The traitor reveals themselves," he said, knuckles white against the carved armrest. "And with them, the fate of everything we hold dear." The doors exploded inward with a crash. Figures cloaked in darkness stormed in, faces twisted with betrayal, weapons gleaming cold under the candlelight. Salim drew a hidden dagger from beneath his thawb, his eyes blazing with ruthless determination. "This is no mere rebellion," he growled. "This is a war for our very souls." Among the chaos, a voice rang out, sharp, accusing, and utterly chilling. The sheikh froze. The name screamed across the chamber walls was one he never expected to hear, a name that shattered the fragile hope he'd begun to nurture. His breath caught, heart pounding dread like a drum in the desert night. And in that suspended moment, as the palace trembled on the edge of ruin, Salim understood that the greatest betrayal was not from a stranger, but from someone who wore loyalty like a mask, and whose love had been a lie all along. The chamber was still, yet the tension hummed through every polished stone as Salim's eyes never left the face of the courtier who had just named the traitor. The hushed gasps and sharp breaths of the assembled nobles were swallowed by the oppressive air, thick with unspoken accusations that clawed at the edges of the grand hall. Salim's side throbbed sharply, but the pain only sharpened his focus. The betrayal was no longer an abstract threat. It stood before them, cloaked in false loyalty. The woman beside him tightened her grip on his arm. The child she carried moved uncertainly, a fragile pulse against the turmoil. Her eyes, fierce and unwavering, met his, silently telling him they were in this storm together. No matter the shadows lurking beyond the marble pillars, no matter the webs woven deeper than the desert's endless dunes. "Speak." Salim's voice cut through the charged silence, cold as the desert night, but edged with command. "Name the traitor." The courtier swallowed, the smile that had once mocked now gone. "It is one you trust most, your own blood, Prince Karim." The words hit the room like a crashing wave. Gasps doubled, whispers raced like wildfire. Salim's heart hammered in his chest with a wild urgency that felt almost foreign. Karim, the brother he had raised on tales of honor and duty. Could this be true? The thought twisted inside him, a venomous seed threatening to rot everything he had fought to protect. The woman's voice broke the roar in his mind, steady and firm. "We cannot let this divide us. We must act carefully. If Karim is indeed the serpent in our midst, we need proof. We cannot fall to suspicion." Salim nodded, swallowing down the turmoil swirling within. Pride and betrayal waged a brutal war in his soul, but duty demanded steel resolve. "Arrange for discreet surveillance," he ordered, voice barely above a whisper, yet stamped with authority. No one must know until we uncover the truth. Faces in the council flickered with uneasy acceptance, but Salim detected the glint of fear mingled with greed in some. The fragile peace of the emirate rested precariously on the edge of a blade. They left the council chamber side by side, the dim torchlight tracing their silhouettes across ancient stone. The palace around them seemed both fortress and prison, a gilded cage forged by centuries of secrets. The scent of oud and musk surrounded them, but now it carried the bitter taste of impending conflict. As they moved through the winding corridors, Salim paused to catch his breath, the wound in his side throbbing with relentless insistence. The woman's hand reached out without hesitation, brushing lightly over the swelling tenderness. The touch was simple, but the weight behind it pressed deep into his heart. This empire was built on trust and loyalty, he said quietly, meeting her gaze. But trust has withered. Now all that remains is to see which roots still hold. She searched his eyes, the flicker of pain softened by something burning, a fragile hope anchored in the darkness. Then we will water those roots together, she vowed softly, for our child and for the future that may yet be. The late hour crept upon them as they ascended to a private balcony that overlooked the endless desert. The moon hung low, silver and distant, a silent sentinel to the shifting sands of their fate. Below, the palace gardens whispered with the rustling of palm fronds, the cool night breeze a balm to frayed nerves. Salim leaned heavily on the marble balustrade, his gaze lost in the horizon where sand met stars. I never expected the web to reach so closely, but that is the nature of betrayal. It grows from within. Her silhouette was a shadow beside him, but when she spoke, it was with the strength of a desert storm. We will expose it before it consumes everything. A silence bloomed between them, vast and charged. His fingers found hers in the dark, intertwined in a pact deeper than words. Suddenly a soft flutter caught their attention. A letter, swift as a desert falcon, delivered by a palace messenger whose face was grim beneath the hood. Salim broke the seal with hands that trembled ever so slightly. His eyes scanned the parchment, and in that moment, the night seemed colder, the stars sharper. The message spoke of an ambush, an orchestrated strike, not just to seize power, but to silence those who dared to challenge the traitor's plot. Impending violence awaited. The palace was no longer a sanctuary, but a battlefield waiting to ignite. Salim looked up, the weight of command settling heavier than ever. His eyes met hers again, searching for the courage they both needed. "We must prepare," he said, voice resolute, yet shadowed by the tempest within. "Not only to defend the empire, but to protect what we have, our family, our future." Her hand tightened on his. "And no matter what comes," she whispered, "we face it together. No more running, no more lies." The distant call of a desert eagle echoed beneath the moon, haunting and wild, as if heralding the storm that would shatter their world. And as the palace doors creaked ominously open, footsteps thudded nearer, unmistakably heavy, deliberate, and closing on them with deadly intent. From the darkness emerged a figure cloaked in the familiar garb of a palace guard. But it was the glint in his eyes that froze Selim's blood, a glint that betrayed not loyalty, but a knife meant to pierce the heart of all he loved. The very man who had vowed allegiance now stood as the living embodiment of treachery. The duel between love and betrayal had reached its breaking point. And in that heavy silence, Selim whispered a prayer to the desert winds, that the blood spilled tonight would not be the end of their story, but the beginning of redemption yet to come. The hush that fell over the chamber felt suffocating, as if the very walls held their breath, waiting for the next cruel blow. Selim's gaze locked onto the courtier who had just dropped the accusation, a name that throbbed like a pulse of betrayal through his chest. Prince Karim, his own blood, the brother he had once trusted above all. Pain throbbed in his side anew, a sharp reminder of his vulnerability amid the ruthlessness of power plays. Yet, beneath the physical ache, a deeper wound bled, a fracture of heart and trust that seemed impossible to mend. The courtiers exchanged wary looks, whispers stirring like a desert breeze, growing restless. Faces once familiar, now morphed into masks of suspicion. Every glance was a question, every silence a blade poised to strike. Beside him, she tightened her grip on his arm, the unspoken vow between them, sealing like tempered steel. Karim, Selim repeated, voice low, yet carrying the weight of an empire's pain. Why? Her dark eyes met his, fierce and unwavering. We tread a volatile path. Selim, suspicions without proof could destroy everything we fight to protect. He nodded slowly, bitterness curling in his gut. Pride, once a fortress, had become a cage that blinded him. Now he faced the necessity of unveiling the truth before it consumed them whole. Discreet surveillance, he commanded, voice steady despite the turmoil. No one outside this council can know until we expose what hides in the shadows. A murmur rippled through the chamber as some eyes flickered with reluctant consent, while others glinted with greed or fear. The delicate thread holding their world together trembled precariously. As the council dissolved into whispers, Selim and the woman moved through the labyrinth of corridors, the flickering torchlight casting long, restless shadows against ancient stone. The scent of oud and musk mingled with tension, a sharp contrast to the cold dread that settled like a desert storm in their chests. The wound in his side throbbed insistently. She reached out, fingertips brushing the swelling with surprising gentleness, a touch that spoke of forgiveness, resolve, and fragile hope. "This empire stands on trust," he murmured, voice rough with exhaustion, "and that trust has been poisoned from within." Her voice was steady, yet tempered with sorrow. "Then we must nurture what remains. For our child, for the future we dare to dream." He swallowed the bitter weight of the past, drawing strength from the fierce flame burning in her eyes. Later, beneath the silver glow of a crescent moon, they stood upon a private balcony overlooking the endless desert. The cool night breeze whispered secrets through the palms, rustling leaves like soft murmurs of fate. Selim's hands clenched them. Balustrade, the pain a dull throb, fading against the storm raging inside him. He searched the horizon where the sand kissed the stars, feeling the crushing weight of legacy, of choices made and those yet to come. "You never expected betrayal to come so close," she murmured behind him, voice a fragile thread weaving through the night. He exhaled, bitter and weary. The heart of betrayal is a serpent. It coils where least expected. Her silhouette stepped beside him, delicate yet unyielding. Then we face it head-on, together. Their fingers intertwined in the dark, a quiet pact against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, the hush of the night was shattered by the swift approach of a palace messenger. Cloaked in emerald, the man bore a sealed letter, urgency etched into every movement. Salim broke the seal with trembling fingers, eyes scanning the words that chilled him anew. An ambush, an orchestrated strike aimed not only at reclaiming the throne, but silencing those who dared oppose the traitor's sinister plot. The palace, once a sanctuary, now felt like a powder keg, underlain with treachery and death. His gaze locked with hers, the gravity of command settling heavy like a desert sun. "We prepare," he declared, voice thick with resolve, "not just to protect the empire, but to shield our family. No one leaves this palace." Her fingers clenched tighter, a whispered vow against the howling storm of fate. No more running, no more deceit. Beyond the walls, the desert night held its breath, the distant cry of an eagle, a haunting herald of the battles to come. As they turned to re-enter the palace, the softest footsteps echoed, heavy, deliberate, and closing fast. From the shadows emerged a figure garbed as a palace guard, but his eyes burned with a darkness that shattered all illusion. Salim barely had time to react before the blade struck. A silver flash of betrayal aimed straight for the heart. The woman gasped, urgency flashing across her face as she lunged forward, shielding the child with desperate strength. The duel between honor and treachery blurred, the intimacy of trust shattered by cold steel. And in that searing moment, Salim's world fractured irreparably. For the knife was wielded by the one who had vowed loyalty, the betrayal most bitter, the trusted guardian whose allegiance was a lie. Pain bit deep, but beneath it all rose a fierce flame, an unbreakable resolve to endure, to fight, and to reclaim love lost to shadows. The desert winds howled mournfully around the palace as Salim's breath hitched, the whispered name of the traitor hanging in the thick night air like a death sentence. But deep within, beneath pain and betrayal, the stubborn ember of hope refused to die. The true battle had only just begun. The air in the chamber felt heavy, saturated with the bitter taste of betrayal that had finally revealed its face. Sheikh Salim's breath came in ragged pulls. The pain in his side, a persistent throb beneath his regal attire. Yet that pain was nothing compared to the ache twisting in his chest, the raw wound left by his brother's treachery. Prince Karim, the man who had once shared childhood dreams and whispered promises, had become the architect of their destruction. The court fell silent, all eyes now fixed on Salim, waiting for him to ignite the storm his soul had long awaited. Yet instead of fury, his gaze held a calm as deep and unyielding as the desert itself. "We have suffered the deepest wound, not from outside enemies, but from the hands of blood," Salim said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of a ruler who had seen both glory and ruin. But the heart of this empire beats strongest when united. His eyes found the woman at his side, the bearer of their child, whose presence now symbolized both hope and the chance for forgiveness. Her dark eyes, fierce with years of hardship, softened imperceptibly, reflecting the quiet strength that had carried her through exile and pain. He took a slow breath, gathering the courage to face what had to come. Kareem's betrayal will not go unpunished, but neither shall it tear us apart. We will uncover the truth, and with it, the threads of loyalty will be woven anew, stronger than before. As the tension in the room gradually dissipated, Salim signaled his trusted loyalists to begin the discreet surveillance. Every guarded glance, every whispered conversation was now under watchful eyes. The fragile peace in the palace was no longer naive. It was prepared, vigilant. Later that night, the palace, draped in the silver glow of a crescent moon, seemed almost surreal. The violent chaos of earlier had given way to a cautious calm. Salim leaned heavily against the carved balcony, the cool breeze brushing over the marble and lifting the weight of his fatigue, if only momentarily. Behind him, footsteps approached. She joined him silently, slipping her hand into his, a simple touch that carried all the unspoken promises of a future reclaimed. "This child," she murmured, her voice low and steady, "is not just a testament to our past, but a beacon to what we can build together." He nodded, eyes tracing the horizon, where stars glittered like scattered diamonds. "For too long, pride blinded me. For too long, I ran from the love that should have been my strength." Her hand tightened around his, the curve of her belly between them, a living symbol of hope blossoming in the desert's harsh embrace. "We will face whatever comes, together. No more secrets, no more running." Her voice was both a vow and a plea, fragile but unbreakable. The morning sun rose over the emirate with a burning brilliance, casting golden light that shimmered against the palace's gleaming walls and the endless dunes beyond. It was a new dawn, one that promised healing amid the scars of yesterday. Inside the great hall, Salim gathered his family and trusted counsel. The accusation against Kareem had been laid bare, yet Salim's unwavering posture called for justice tempered by mercy. The prince had been arrested, but Salim insisted on a fair trial, because even in betrayal, blood deserved respect. The court murmured, some riddled with relief, others with regret, but all recognized that leadership meant balancing strength with grace. In the following days, as the investigation unfolded, Salim personally met with those who had suffered from the rebellion's shadows within. He listened to their stories, their pain, their hopes, and he vowed to reshape his empire, not as a fortress of cold ambition, but as a home nurtured by understanding and truth. The woman who had stood by him, once broken but never defeated, now smiled with a genuine light that softened even Salim's stern gaze. Their love, tested by fire, had been forged anew. Together, they planned a future illuminated by honest devotion and shared dreams. One evening, as the desert breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine and frankincense through open windows, Salim stood beside her in the palace garden. The air was filled with the gentle rustle of palm fronds and the soft flicker of lanterns shaping a quiet sanctuary. Their hands met over the promise of new life, the child growing safely within her, a symbol of all that had been lost and all they still had to protect. "Whatever storms come," Salim whispered, "we will endure." She smiled, eyes full of unwavering faith, because love is the strongest legacy. And beneath the endless desert sky, with stars woven bright above, their hearts beat in steady hope, a rhythm sealed by forgiveness, courage, and the unbreakable bond of family. The palace, once shadowed by secrets and betrayal, now hummed with a renewed promise. Its stones held stories, not only of power and ambition, but of redemption and lasting love. Sheikh Salim, no longer the man who had fled from his past, stood tall. His empire was not just a kingdom of gold and silk, but a sanctuary where hearts could heal and dreams could bloom eternal. The journey had been perilous and fraught with pain, but in the end, love had triumphed, tender, fierce, and enduring as the desert itself.